Conversations, episode Kurt Schilling. I am your host, Becks, and whether you are a first-time listener joining us or a long-time listener making the trek back after a long delay, welcome in. We're very happy to have you either way. Apologize for that almost 3-week break that we've had. I think it's the longest that Conversations has had between episodes, but you know what? The dog days of summer are real. They were tough, and I don't think there's anybody on this earth that is more happy that it is over than me. Because we're now back and being able to talk about a lot of exciting things coming up here as we roll into the fall. Most importantly of which is the start of college football, which is just around the corner. That's going to be happening this weekend. That is what this episode is going to be all about, is previewing what is ahead. We're going to do a wrap around of the 7 conferences that are playing in those 8 games in week 0 or week 1, however you like to refer to it. But if you're somebody who's into everything else that's going on, things are starting to heat up in a lot of other areas as well. NFL preseason in full swing. We've got the U.S. Open in tennis, the last Grand Slam of the season that's going to be kicking off here very shortly with the main draw. And we've got baseball heating up as we move into the playoff push. So a lot to cover both in this episode, but in future episodes of Conversations as well. So stay with us both for this episode and for those in the future. And if you're wondering what is the best way to keep up with what Conversations is doing, great question. There's a lot of different ways to follow us. We're on all the socials, Facebook, X at KBEX_ATC, Instagram at cornversationspod. And if you'd like to send us a mailbag question, you can do so by sending it to cornversationspod@gmail.com. Those mailbag questions came hot and heavy last year during the football season. So really looking to see those come through again and answer what you guys want to hear in future episodes. But without further ado, I do want to turn the page here to what we're going to be talking about and introduce the guest that's going to be along with me for the ride for this episode. You've heard him before. He's been on for a lot of different football topics, and really happy to have him back on the pod. So I want to welcome back in our buddy Michael T. Michael, how are you doing today?
It's a delight to talk to you, and it's a delight to see fall is right around the corner. It's amazing that September is here and week 0 is here and college football is back.
Absolutely. What did you do for the few weeks or so that we call the dog days of summer, the dead period in sports, if you will? Anything exceptional, or were you just sitting waiting, kind of like that Pablo Escobar meme?
Oh, certainly sitting and waiting, but the number one sport always available, pro wrestling, K-Bex. Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay, all in this weekend. Always enjoy that. Mercedes Moné, women's champion. It's been a wonderful summer of wrestling.
Well, there you go. See, I have never really gotten into pro wrestling, which is why I was sitting out in the cold, or in the heat, I guess is a better way to describe it, and was just counting down the days until we could have this episode. But it's good to hear that some people spent their time more wisely than myself.
Certainly not with loved ones and friends,
Yeah,
enjoying the
yeah.
sunshine.
All right. Well, I think we've got a lot to cover here in no particular order. But as I mentioned earlier in the episode, there are 8 games that are happening here in week 1. Some people refer to it as week 0, but college football has kind of gradually moved away from that marketing. And 7 conferences will kick off. So we're going to do whip around coverage of all 7 of those conferences. I've got them listed here, and we'll talk about them in this order, but it is not in any way an indication of what we think are going to be the best conferences. It's just how we figured we're going to talk about them. So I have the Big 12 written down first. That's what we're going to talk about. I look at the Big 12 as the least interesting of the Power 4 conferences, if only because there seem to be a Big 2 and then an others list as far as the Big 12 is concerned. And the Big 2, of course, are the participants from last year's conference title game, Texas Tech and BYU. Michael, do you see it any differently this year as far as the Big 12 is concerned, or is this really a 2-horse race where everybody else is kind of playing for scraps, if you will?
Oh, I certainly think it's a 2-horse race, as you talked about. Texas Tech, BYU, of course, top two teams. When you said you were not interested, would you have been more interested if Brendan Sorsby was playing, or would it have no impact whatsoever for Texas Tech and the Big 12?
Well, I could answer that a number of ways. In terms of interest, I'm not sure that it really would have changed my perception of the conference, but in terms of whether or not I think Texas Tech could run through the conference the way that they did last year, I do think there's a possibility that Brendan Sorsby could have added an extra element to that offense. I look at Texas Tech as a team that is absolutely still the most or one of the two most talented teams in the conference. But I wonder with Will Hammond whether or not they're going to take a slight step back offensively with him at the helm. And I know he did fill in last year when Baron Morton got hurt, but I look at this team as a half step down, mostly because of what they lost on the defensive line. But when you look at what Baron Morton was able to do last year, it's going to be hard to replicate that whoever you are. And I think that Sorsby would have added an element of the run game there from the quarterback that Texas Tech really hasn't had for a long time. And I think that would have mixed things up enough for opposing defensive coordinators coming into this year that it would have been hard to prepare not only for what Texas Tech has around the rest of the offense, but then you would have had to prepare for his athleticism as well at the quarterback position. And they're not going to get that this year. So I actually think that Texas Tech might be falling closer to the rest of the conference. They're still probably pound for pound the best team, but the gap has closed between them and certainly BYU, who I think actually has taken a step up compared to last year.
Oh, I mean, you get year two of the BYU quarterback, Bo. What's his last name? Escaping me.
Bachmeyer.
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 Yes. Yeah, he
Mm-hmm.
comes back. Get a little bit more seasoning there. I mean, I think it's going to be an interesting case study for Texas Tech, and can money buy a team? Like I'm agreeing with you, where I think Hammond is a step back from Sorsby. Not as strong as you thought you were going to be at that position, but still, I mean, they had 12 starters that are coming back, and then they add 10 more transfers who were starters last year. So it's like, does NIL money really make a huge difference? If they win the Big 12 this year, I'm going to say, okay, this is changing everything. But I do think a BYU could pop up. I'm interested if Rich Rod in West Virginia do something. I think he still has a trick or two up his sleeve, and this is a good year where nothing's happening. The champions down a little bit. It's a free for all for everyone. It's like, why not snake your way up there?
Yeah, no, I think it's great that you brought up West Virginia. And actually, it reminds me of a plug that I forgot to do at the beginning of the episode. For those of you who are listening right now who like to do a little bit of reading as well, all of the previews, conference previews for college football are going up little by little on Around the Corn Sports blog. And the Big 12 has been posted, as well as most of the other conferences that are kicking off this weekend. The other two that are not yet up, the MAC and Conference USA, will be up before Saturday. So be sure to check those out if you're somebody who wants an in-depth look at all of these conferences. And the reason that I bring this up now is because I have West Virginia as one of the teams that I like, who I'm not sure they're going to necessarily compete for a Big 12 title this year, but I do like what Rich Rod is building in his second go around. And I do think that they're going to make a bowl this season. So that is a great point to bring up. I really think that what he has brought from Jacksonville State, and he's got Cam Cook now, who was, I believe, the leader in rushing yards last year in FBS. He's got him in the backfield, and Michael Hawkins, who was previously at Oklahoma and started some games for the Sooners at the quarterback position. So there's a lot of athleticism in that backfield, and I think they're going to be tough to stop when it comes to the type of offense that Rich Rod's teams have been known to run in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like uh, they have a chance. Houston would be the other team where I'm like, oh, maybe if I didn't name someone besides like the big three, if you had Utah to the big three of the Big 12. But I think even Utah takes a step back, losing his coach, changing the culture and everything, it's not going to happen instantly.
Yeah, Utah is an interesting one because I'm not high on them, but Morgan Scalley was kind of the coach in waiting there for a couple of years. And interestingly, of course, Kyle Whittingham decided to take the Michigan job, probably just because it became available. But I do think that Utah knows what they want to do, and Scalley's not going to change things up too much there. But I do wonder how much of what they were able to do when it came to difficult decisions in game had to do with what Whittingham was ultimately dictating and what was going on with the defensive coordinator side, which is where Scally came from. So I have them taking a step back as well. And the other thing, realistically, is I think they were already a step behind BYU and Texas Tech, who are, as we've kind of gone through already, the two uh, main factors here in the conference. But I want to ask the question of you, Michael. Do you think that the Big 12 would have it any other way? Because BYU and Texas Tech don't play each other during the regular season. And as we can recall from last year, one of the reasons that BYU was ultimately the first team out of the playoff, I suppose, other than Notre Dame, is because they were unable to get by Texas Tech. And this year, interestingly, they're going to have an opportunity to play both Notre Dame, and then if they're going to play Texas Tech, it's going to be in a Big 12 title scenario as opposed to regular season, and then have to try and beat them again in the Big 12 title. So, what do you think the Big 12 is thinking in terms of their prospects to try to get in multiple teams to this year's playoff?
I think it's looking tough. I don't think, like we mentioned, like each team has its weak spot. I do think, if you're looking at the broader conference picture, it's like, okay, some teams, I feel like they're on the ACC level where it's like, okay, you might have one or two teams that can compete. We're talking about Texas Tech, BYU, Texas Tech, Utah. It just cycles in and out. But I don't think you're going to see um, threatening to have three or four bids until maybe Oklahoma State with the North Texas crew coming together. Does TCU make a run at it again? I mean, possibilities are endless, but I still think it's coming down to Texas Tech.
Yeah. Great story, by the way, at Oklahoma State. Normally, I don't love the situations where a group of six coach takes a lot of his team and tries to move them up to the P4 level because I feel bad, honestly, for the G6 team that they helped build. But in this case, the story of Drew Mestamaker is one of the best that college football has seen for some time. A guy who had not started a varsity game at the high school level, was a walk on at North Texas, didn't start until their bowl game a couple of seasons ago, lit it up in that bowl game, and then pretty much over the offseason transitioned into being their option at quarterback there for last season. Ended up having a really good season with North Texas, and now has parlayed that into not only a P4 starting job, but if you look at a number of draft boards, he's really worked his way up and could be a guy next year that is being talked about as somebody who can help save an NFL franchise. So it's crazy how quickly his trajectory has ascended, given where he started just a few seasons ago at the prep level.
And it's funny when you mention, I mean, for your reasoning, when those coaches leave the group of group of 5, 6, would you call it group of five?
I call it group of six,
Group of
but
six.
I
That's
can
what I was thrown
understand.
off. I was like, wait a second, you're too kind, Kyle. But I mean, I was there's another team that we'll talk about later. I think at some point that I'm excited of, where Coach left the group of six and brought his guys with him. And I mean, it's the Frank Segnay model. I mean, even when he took the James Madison guys to Indiana, they still had success. I mean, I really do think coaching makes a difference in the college level still, and I think we're going to see Drew Messenger be the proof of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're definitely going to talk Signetti here later on in the show, but I think it's a good segue as we're talking G6 to transition onto our next conference, which is the American Conference. And this one is always intriguing to me because top to bottom, the G6 is probably the most robust of excuse me, the American is the most robust of the G6 conferences. And last year, they proved that, I think, better than any season since the college football playoff has been around, and certainly deserved to have one of their teams make it. Tulane obviously bowed out to Ole Miss in similar fashion to when they played them earlier in the year, but that slot deserved to go to one of those teams. The question that I have for you, Michael, is do we still see the American as the kings of the G6 for the 2026-2027 season? Because a number of those teams that were at the top last year, and generally speaking, the teams that have the most NIL money, are the ones that also lose their head coach. And in a number of spots, they lose their quarterback as well. And North Texas is one example, but there's a number of others like South Florida with Alex Golish and Byron Brown going to Auburn. You've got the Memphis situation, which was is he going, is he not, to Arkansas, and ultimately he took that job. And as well, you've got the Tulane situation where John Summerall decided to head off to go to Florida. So there's a lot of turnover in the names that we recognized from last season in the American. Do you see that being a challenge for them to get back to the college football playoff, or have they at this point established enough muscle memory from the committee's perspective where if they've got a team who's sitting there at 9-3, 10-2, there's going to be a difficult time putting a team from one of the other G6 conferences ahead of them in the rankings and sending somebody else to go and probably be the 12 seed in the playoff?
I mean, I think the way I look at it, to quote the great poet laureate Wiz Khalifa, the game don't change. There's just new players in it. And you mentioned South Florida losing Golish, Byron Brown, but in comes Brian Hartline, a guy that we both probably big fans of and think he'll be successful. East Carolina losing 10 starters, 8 starters on defense, but then coming right back and adding new transfers, and I think it's not unless like a Memphis makes a run. Maybe I think they're probably like the cream of the crop right now. If I had to guess of this group, I mean, Navy's always lurking. They have another run like last year. I could see them making a strong push, but I think it kind of falls back this year. Like you mentioned, it's not as strong as it was, and there's just better teams out there in other conferences.
Yeah. Interestingly, you didn't note UTSA, and I'm a little bit surprised about that because I feel like, to use your words, UTSA just seems to lurk in the American, but they've never won the conference before. They're bringing back a lot of talent. Owen McCown at quarterback, obviously the son of the NFL quarterback. Do you see UTSA being able to finally break through in a year where maybe some of the other usual suspects are down a bit?
I can certainly see that happening. I mean, it comes in cycles. 1 year it's Tulane, 1 year it's South Florida, 1 year it's North Texas. I mean, I feel like these group of five, group of six teams, they always cycle through. New blood comes in, takes the top. That coach leaves. Now they're back at the bottom, and they just rebuild brick by brick.
Yeah. Yeah, and UTSA, they had a tough year last year. Pretty inconsistent, a lot of injuries. I think that if they're healthy, they're certainly going to be in the mix. But to your point, when you lose coaches and great players to the transfer portal like the American Conference has this year, you do have to expect that there's going to be a new crop that's going to come back in. And your assessment of teams like Memphis, which really have all the resources available to them in comparison to the rest of the conference, that FedEx money, it's going to be hard to compete with the schools that have established themselves because of that. Because when you're talking G6, the gap between the haves and the have nots is similarly large as it is in some of the P4 conferences. And we'll get into that as far as the P4 is concerned. I think there's much more potential for the gap to close between the haves and the have nots when it comes to P4 conferences, then there is the potential for that to close with the G6s. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this year. I do think that there are schools like South Florida that might struggle a little bit, even with Brian Hartline coming in. But at the same time, it is hard to compete with those schools because they do have more funds available to them than some of these other schools like Florida Atlantic, for example, who I really like. I think they've got a good nucleus on the offensive side, but you wonder whether or not things are really going to come together the way that they should at programs like that.
All right, so pick a winner right now for the conference.
I have UTSA. I
Okay.
think UTSA is going to win. I do have Tulane getting back to the title game, but I do think that UTSA, to me, has everything that they need on the offensive side. Tulane is a little bit of a question mark there. They're a question mark in general. I don't know what you're going to get from them. And so I look at the schedule and I think they can make it through and get to the title game. Somebody has to. But UTSA is who I think should win the conference. But we've been burned on that before. I think I've picked them in the past, and they, as I mentioned, have not been able to actually close the deal yet. All right, so we're going to move then to, I think, one of the favorites for the episode, the Atlantic Coast Conference. This is near and dear to your heart, Michael. We'll obviously give you a minute to sound off on your favorite program within the conference. But before we get there, I do want to start with the question that is burning, I think, from a lot of people, given what we saw last year in the college football playoff. Has the torch officially been passed in the ACC from a Clemson to a Miami? What's your thoughts there?
I mean, I feel like it has to be. It's We've seen Miami now make runs into the college football playoff, spending that NIL money to bring in a big transfer quarterback every year. I think you have to take them serious at this point.
Yeah, I want to point out to the listeners out there that Michael was the only person in our college football playoff pick'em group that sent Miami to the final. I think you actually had him winning, but you were definitely the only person who sent him to the final as well. So props to you on that. You were the only person who had faith in the ACC, and I think that might have had something to do with who they had to play in the quarterfinal too. But we won't go down that path for too long.
Oh, I mean, that's the effects of watching Malachi Corley in person, or Malachi Tony in person. I've never uh, been so excited, like, whoa, who's this guy? And you look and you see that he's only a freshman. I was like, I couldn't believe that this guy running over the Panthers, a very common refrain in my life, but absolutely killing it last year. And then you had Darian Menza from Duke, who took the ACC champions to the finals and brought home the gold, getting the big money NIL deal. 34 touchdowns last year at Duke. Him and Tony all on the offense. I don't care about anything else on that roster. I'm taking them to the Final Four again this year, and then maybe even title.
I agree with you. I think they have title potential. I was not sure about Mario Cristobal before he put together last year's team. Realistically, he's built this from his own his own image. He knows what he wants to get done. I mean, he's obviously a former player there, and he understands the culture that needs to be in place for them to be successful. But I think that it could have gone a lot of ways, depending on how talented and truly talented Cristobal was as a head coach, and I think he's proven himself. And so I think this year is going to be similar to maybe 2 years ago from an offensive perspective. You're not going to have as much game management going on at the quarterback position. I think you can let Menza loose a little bit more than you could our boy now in the NFL, whose name is
Carson
escaping
Beck,
me. Carson Beck, thank you.
the sloth from Ice
But
Age. Once I saw that meme, that's all I ever think about when I see him. I feel so bad.
Well, I was about to go there, but then I figured I would just leave that out
That's
of
my
the
job.
the conversation. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Thank you though for that. Yeah, I think Menza is definitely going to be able to propel that offense similar to what Cam Ward was able to do. And as you mentioned, Tony is one of the most electric players in college football, and so um, I think that I was having this conversation actually with somebody earlier today, and so I guess I'll bring this into the conversation regarding Clemson. Do you think that Dabo Sweeney has the capability to figure out this new era as far as NIL and transfer portal is concerned? Or do you think that he is simply going to be stuck in his ways, remain stubborn about how he wants to run his program, and some others in the conference have the potential to pass him by over time?
Oh, I mean, that's so funny because the way I was going to phrase it is Clemson dead? Do we bury them in the dirt now from title contention, Final Four contention? Sure, now with the expanded playoff even more, it's like, yeah, they might make a little late seed run, but I don't think Dabo's changing his ways. I honestly believe that he would took the Alabama job if they offered it to them, but I wonder if he said no, because it seems like how would you not ask him immediately whenever Saban left, but I wonder if he's just I'm Clemson till I die now, and we're gonna go. The ship's going down my way, and
Yeah, I have my questions as to whether or not Clemson can truly compete for the ACC title this year. I don't have them getting to the title game. Um, But I was just curious on your thoughts. I know he is a polarizing guy. He's definitely a polarizing guy up in our neck of the woods here in the Midwest Northeast area. But I think potentially, if they have another season like they had last year, he may even start to wear on the fans down in Clemson, South Carolina, as well, because there was obviously a uh, a culture that was built there, and it was working quite well for him. And things have changed very quickly, and it does not seem like Clemson has been able to keep up. But things can change very quickly in this era as well. So there is obviously the potential that could change overnight as we as we sit here and watch the upcoming season. But
Oh, Kyle, one point
moving,
I want to add before
yeah,
we move on to something about besides Clemson. We will find out week one. Fraud watch, fraud bowl, Clemson at LSU. Somebody, either it's either Lane or it's Dabo. Somebody is getting thrown overboard with a loss, especially if it's a bad loss.
yeah, yeah. I don't know that I like Clemson's chances in this game. I to be honest, there's not much that we know offensively about what Clemson's going to try and do. We don't know much about the quarterback there. Obviously, LSU has Sam Levitt coming in, and Lane Kiffin has things humming pretty well with every offense that he's managing. But yeah, I don't know. Week one, I think it's probably going to be a question mark about whether or not Clemson is capable of competing this year. But we'll see. That's why we watch these games.
Of course.
Um, I do want to though shift to a question that really is going to be asked this year. Is honestly, it's already being asked, which is Florida State and Mike Norvell. Um, what type of season does Florida State need to have for Norvell to keep his job, in your opinion?
I mean, if it's not a deep run in the season, talking 9 wins. I mean, I think he's out. Even if it's at 8, I could see them saying you're out. I mean, you give him grace after being wrongfully kicked out of the or wrongfully not making the college football playoff 2 years ago, but then to go 2-10 and then 5-7 after that, it's like it's your leash is over. It's put up or shut up time, and yeah, I think if it's not an ACC championship, his job is in danger.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that 8 wins is going to be the bottom of the capability for him to keep his job. It's a manageable schedule. It's not an easy schedule to begin with. A game against SMU early September. They travel to Alabama the week after that. A game at Louisville and Miami back to back is going to be a tough stretch there. And then they play your Pittsburgh team middle of November, which is always going to be tough for a team from down south coming up to play that far north at that point in the year. So, there are road blocks there for them to be able to have that 8-9 win season. But I agree with you. I think it's going to have to be a good attempt at an ACC championship game appearance. Even I don't even know if I would necessarily need to see a title game if I'm Florida State, but they need to be in the conversation come mid-November, because that fan base doesn't accept not wanting to pay attention to the team when you get into the business end of the season.
Oh, and I think his buyout is larger than Jimbo's from Texas A&M at this point, and so I mean, I think if you get that 8 number, he's in. I mean, as long as they see progression upward, guess going from 2 wins to 5 wins is technically improvement.
Yeah. Yeah. And, 5 wins to 8 wins is improvement as well. So I think that if they show continued improvement, they probably will give him another year. And that's a good point. As far as, what it's going to cost them. They've made this mistake before. I doubt that they want to make it again, because you don't know who you're going to bring in either, realistically. Um, all right, so this is the big moment now. As far as ACC talk is concerned, I want to give you the floor. Let's talk Pitt football a little bit. Let me know what is there to look forward to about Pitt football. What are your expectations? You're obviously speaking. You've got people who are listening who want to hear and have their opinions as well about the team that they follow. Let's have a Michael minute about Pitt football here.
Well, of course, It starts with now sophomore quarterback Mason Heinschel from Oregon, Ohio. Shout out Toledo area. Always proud to rep the Buckeye State. But I mean, the schedule to me is so easy. They start Miami, Central Florida. Okay, they win. They lose that one. The season's over. Doesn't matter. Toughest game at Virginia Tech early October. At Miami at the end of October, and we talked about Florida State already. They don't scare me. Louisville doesn't scare me. But what scares me at the end, at Cal Berkeley, and this is the Pitt minute. I've given my 30 seconds to Mason. Shout out Sean Lee, or yeah, Sean Lee Jr., the DB freshman All American who was going to transfer, ended up coming back to Pitt. The only other exciting piece of the puzzle in Pitt. But for California, I know we talked about him before. I call him JWS because he's three names. I'm trying to look it up right now to
Uh-oh. It looks like we lost Michael temporarily. I think I'll try and fill in here for what he was talking about. Um, California, they've got a quarterback. He's got three names, as Michael was saying. Jaron Kiwe Sagapulatele. I'm sure I butchered that. JKS is what they call him for short. Really, really good player. He's going to be one of the ACC's best this season. He's certainly somebody to look out for. Cal probably is not going to have the best season in the ACC this year, but he is electric at the quarterback position. He's going to be a future pro, and he's somebody that I know now that Michael is back with us, we can talk with him again about it. Michael, I was filling in for you as you cut out there for a moment. I was just singing the praises of JKS as you cut out there. Anything in particular you want to say about him?
Oh no, I mean the rest. I don't know how far I got in my rant, but I was saying that they would be the sleeper team for Cal running up. Like he would be the big name everyone recognized, like become mainstream. Maybe transfer to a bigger school, but I mean they were able to keep him at Cal this year. You got that Berkeley money, but I expect them to be a super team, and I expect Pick to, if they're not at 7 wins and they have a real shot with their easy schedule, but I expect 6 or 7 wins, usual 5-0 start on cupcakes, and then losing 4 of the last 5.
Yeah. I actually don't feel similarly to you as far as Cal is concerned. I actually think they're going to struggle early in the season. I think UCLA is better than people are giving them credit for. Going to Syracuse across the country is going to be tough for any team. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether Cal is going to be able to get it done. They are a better team, I think, than Syracuse, but that is a tough trip. And then they've got Clemson and UNLV to end out September and move into early October. And UNLV is one of my picks if we're talking about teams that could take the Americans' rightful bid from the college football playoff away from them. UNLV is at the near top, if not the top of my list as far as teams that might be able to do that. And I'm cutting into the Mountain West preview a little bit, but I think it is appropriate there at that point. But Pittsburgh, you mentioned you were going through the schedule, and then I think you started to cut out there, so I'm not sure how much of that we actually got. Maybe we can just ask the question about point blank. What do you see Pitt's record being at the end of the season?
I'm gonna give them like an 8-3 where they lose to Miami and Louisville and like another team they should beat, and they'll be like, "Oh, look at us, we won 8 games," but it's like, yeah, you didn't beat anyone good.
Okay. All right. I will say that Friday night game where they take on Virginia Tech in Blacksburg is
Mm-hmm.
likely going to be can't miss football because
Tickets already sold
both
out.
of well, and both of those teams have a really good chance of being undefeated going into that game. I think there's a good chance then that it's a top 25 matchup. And obviously, everybody's going to want to see how Virginia Tech is able to manage coming into that game with a little bit of pressure on them. Obviously, with it being James Franklin's first season at the helm there. But all right, so we got the Michael minute for Pittsburgh out of the way. Another 8-4 season. Pitt fans, sound off in the comments what you think about that, whether you agree with Michael or if he's selling these guys short. Um, you know best. But we'll go ahead and we'll briefly switch then to the Mountain West since I kind of already brought up UNLV a minute ago. the question that I have for you, Michael, and I asked this question in the preview that is up on Around the Corn Sports blog, is what's next for the Mountain West now that their bell cow in Boise State is gone? Is this a conference that can survive without their talisman, if you will, and still be a conference that can compete, hold their own with somebody like the American? Or do you think that this conference kind of falls down the pecking order a little bit and reflects more of your Sun Belt or your MAC as far as G6s are concerned without the Broncos?
Yeah, my question, I was gonna answer your question with a question. Was it be too mean to call them the West Coast Mac? Because that was my feeling and sentiment. I mean, I know you're a big UNLV fan, and they have had success, and they do have talent on the roster. I'm sure you can go into other things you like about them and why they're a real contender and more Sunbelt than Mac. But I think with the bottom half of the conference, it's just those are some weak teams, and all it takes is one transfer away and one coaching higher way to get UNLV back to the bottom of the pecking order, like we talked about earlier with other teams.
Yeah. Well, two things I want to bring up about, are they the MAC of the West? Um, with Northern Illinois joining this year, in theory, yes, they there's some overlap historically with Northern Illinois being from the MAC, now joining the Mountain West this year. So if they have any sort of success in the conference in their first season, I think that you could make that argument either tongue in cheek or with some amount of seriousness. The other thing as well that I want to bring up is they've got another team that's coming into the fold, North Dakota State, who, as we know, is one of the perennial contenders in the FCS division, now making the jump to FBS. If North Dakota State is highly competitive in the Mountain West this year, and Vegas thinks they can be, I think they're one of the top four teams that has the best odds of winning the Mountain West this year. I think you look at the Mountain West and you say, okay, if teams that are making that jump from FCS to FBS are able to compete immediately in your conference, you might have a hard time considering yourself one of the premier G6 leagues. I know that North Dakota State is a little bit of a unique example because it's been something like 17 seasons since they haven't made the playoff, but it's still a jump up in competition. It's still going to be a pretty rough travel schedule for them to face all the teams that they're going to face in the Mountain West, which has an impact on how the team is going to do throughout the year. I look at that. I'm going to be really curious how the Bison do this year. If they're competing near the end of the year, especially with the number of road games that they have in conference, I'm going to look at the Mountain West and I'm going to say, okay, you've taken a pretty significant hit not having Boise State in there to kind of prop you up.
Yeah, I mean, on North Dakota State, I wish we could see this team last year be in the Mountain West when they had Cole Payton and Bryce Lance, a little bit deeper team and NFL caliber talent. But I mean, if you still get one or two guys a year from there, and talented program like you mentioned, the 17 years of playoffs. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think if they make a jump, I expect them. I think they played Iowa well a couple years ago or last year. So they always are, a tough team to play, but they're not beating those teams, and that's the key. But I do think they could beat people at the bottom of the Mountain West, like your San Jose States and New Mexico, thing like that. So Northern Illinois.
Yeah, I feel bad piling on Northern Illinois. They're the team that I mentioned I don't like from the conference this year. A lot has happened to them since the beginning of the year. They're obviously moving to a new conference. It's going to be a tough schedule as well for them from a travel perspective. Not a lot looks positive, but they say they're going to fight. And, when you see those teams start to have some success, you almost instantly start rooting for them as well. So I wish the best to the Huskies, but I don't have high hopes for what they're going to do in their inaugural season with the MWC. All right, we're going to switch then to the conference I think that we are going to have as much to say about as we did for the ACC. That would be the Big Ten Conference. And before we get into the details of the Big Ten, a question that I've asked pretty much everybody that I've been able to talk to over the past couple of weeks are their thoughts on whether or not the Big Ten has ascended to the top of college football in terms of top to bottom depth and also just overall being the quote unquote best conference in college football. So I want to hear your thoughts on this, Michael. I've got mine. I'll share them as well. But where do you stand on the discussion, which comes up almost every year? Typically, it's between the SEC and the Big Ten in terms of who the kings of college football are.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at it year by year, if you're into this year and not comparing the past and things of that nature, I think you have to roll with it right now. Defending champs, all that nature, strong teams, number 1 and 2 on the top 25 for the preseason. Indiana not far behind from them. But I mean, what's your call when you look at the conference as a whole? How are you grading it? Are you looking just top dogs, the depth of the conference, playoff success, player talent, coaching? Like for me, I think it's like you're the top two. So for me, like I'm big on Oregon this year, so I think that gets my head. I don't believe in LSU, so that drops them down, things like that. And then I think uh, top dog and playoff success are the indicators like this conference is strong, this is growing, and not always the same team. I mean, now we've seen Bama kind of fall off the map, Oklahoma up and down in the SEC. Old Miss, I think, is going to be good again this year, but I mean that's a quarterback leading the way, and once he's gone with when Trinidad leaves, it's like okay, are you maintaining that momentum? Are you still building on it? I feel like Oregon's done that. Ohio State does that certainly, and Indiana's proving it. I consider this their Will Howard era with Josh Hoover, where it's like, oh, he's not the most talented guy, but he can lead an offense with 32 starts under his belt. Um, so I have a Big Ten at number one for sure.
Yeah, I love that take about Josh Hoover. I think we're going to get into that a little bit more deeply here in a minute. But to answer your question about what I look for and why I also have the Big Ten as the top dog for this year, you talk about the success on the field. You can't argue with three straight national titles. It's hard to argue even more so when it's three straight national titles and they come from different programs. One of the things with the SEC that we've seen in the past is yes, they've won a lot of the titles, but they're coming from 2, 3 teams over the course of 5 or 6 years. Whereas with the Big Ten, you've got 3 teams that have won the last 3 titles. You've got 2 more teams that, if we're taking a look at top to bottom, teams that we think might have a chance to win a national title this year. There could be a fourth Big Ten title at the end of the 2026-2027 season, and it could come from a fourth different program. And I'm not sure that we've seen that in college football. We certainly haven't seen it in the playoff era, but I'm not even sure we've seen it prior to that. And so I look at that and I say, okay, with that kind of depth year over year, you're putting something together that seems sustainable. And then obviously, when you look at the number of teams that get into the college football playoff as well, I think that has an impact on telling the story as far as true depth is concerned. Of the 2 years that we've had a 12-team playoff, now going into the third, there have been at least one conference that has 4 teams that make it in. One year it was the Big Ten, one year it was the SEC. I think you're going to see that again this year. There's going to be a conference who's going to get 4 teams in. And kind of like you were saying, you go down the list of the SEC and you think about the teams that could make it. I see the Big Ten having more opportunities for teams to slip up here and there and still have somebody who can fill that gap very quickly. I look at 6 teams in the Big Ten that realistically are going to have every opportunity to be right in the realm of, that 8 to 12 range, kind of like we've seen with the SEC in some years, where they're right there. And if some team loses one week, you're going to see the other team that's right behind them fill their spot. It's not going to be an SEC team that's going to fill that last spot. It's going to be a Big Ten one. And I think that also is an indicator that the Big Ten is a more robust conference where you want to be robust, which is at the top level to just below that top level of your conference. And then the last thing I'll say, and I think that this has as much to do holistically with what we're watching across the season, is that in the past I've felt like the SEC conference schedule is where you're going to find can't miss football on a week in, week out basis, starting in about late September all the way through to the end of the regular season. And looking at the Big Ten schedule this year in comparison with the SEC, I think that the Big Ten has taken that over. I think a lot of us are going to be watching big noon kickoff every single week from that time frame that I just talked about, because with Ohio State and Oregon and USC and Michigan and Penn State, and I'm missing a
Washington,
team
number
here.
17 right now.
Well, Washington's in there. I know I'm missing Indiana, Indiana in there as well. You've got 6, 7, maybe even 8 teams where if any of those teams beat or lost to each other, you wouldn't be shocked. And they're all going to be playing each other, at least one of them every week for 8 straight weeks. And that, I think, is what makes a conference interesting and robust, and it gives people the perception that it is truly the best conference in the league, because you're watching them every week. And I don't think that it's always been the case where the whole country has been watching the Big Ten. Whereas I do think that you could say in the past that most of the country is paying attention to what the SEC is doing at their 3:30 time slot. So those are my reasons why the Big Ten has ascended. But it's a close one too. It really is.
Is there a team you could see kind of making their way into that Indiana role now? Because like I mentioned, I think Indiana has a down year. Still, like maybe a top 10 team, top 15, but not a title contender. But is there maybe a team that makes a jump up that we're not thinking about right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I think Washington has the ability to potentially be that team that you're not really thinking about as a bona fide playoff contender, because there's so much seemingly ahead of them. But they've got a lot of top line talent there. I love Damon Williams. They're replacing some good players as well, but the way that they want to play, I think, makes them dangerous. And going out to Seattle to play them is a tough ask, even for the top line teams. So I think Washington would have to have some things bounce their way, as any team does. But if there's anybody that we're not talking a lot about that could make a run, I think it would be Washington. I hesitate to say a team like Iowa, who I think is pretty strong, would be that team, because we've seen Iowa beat this team before, and typically they're just not able to, when they need that extra oomph, they don't really have it.
Yeah, I mean,
What
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, from your side, do you think there's a team that could fit that mold
What if I
from,
told you
from
there's
the
a
Big
team?
Ten or
I was to say
anywhere
we're
really?
talking Big Ten. We're talking the
Yeah,
Superior Conference. Um, could I interest you in a team that does not play Ohio State, Indiana, or Oregon in conference play?
I think I know who you're talking about, but yeah, go ahead.
The fighting Matt Campbells of Penn State
Hmm.
brings the whole squad from Iowa State basically with them over. A lot of draft picks gone from Penn State, but most importantly, James Franklin. I feel like it's that big exhale. And when you have that easy schedule, I mean, I think I heard Joe Clack call it like a 10-win caliber schedule. It's like I don't disagree with that. I mean, it's that schedule quirk is why they're number 18 in the AP poll. I feel like I thought it'd be like a kind of like a rebuilding session, but people are believing in Penn State.
Yeah, I'm not a believer in them right now. I'm a hater, actually, because I had a lot of faith in Iowa State last year to get to the playoff from the Big 12. And it wasn't entirely clear what was wrong with that Iowa State team, but they couldn't they couldn't get the job done. They had a rough middle of the year, and I've seen that from Matt Campbell before. And I just wonder, is he going into a situation where that has kind of been the scenario for Penn State for a long time, where they're there. They're one of the teams that you think has the opportunity to do something great, but then when they get that opportunity to prove it, oftentimes they're finding themselves losing to Ohio State, or they're finding themselves losing to Michigan, right? The opportunities that are presented to them, they haven't really been able to grab. And I feel kind of like Matt Campbell as a head coach has reflected that as well. And so I see him take a team that I believed in last year and didn't get the job done in a lesser conference, and he's going to try and do it in the Big Ten, a conference that we're talking about is potentially the best in college football. I think that's a tough ask, frankly. I think that even with the schedule the way that it is, there's going to be some level of adjustment that's going to need to be made. They've got more players from Iowa State as far as last year's team is concerned than Iowa State does. And so that's a lot of turnover to get ready for, an entirely new schedule and, playing in different environments as far as road games are concerned. So I'm not high on Penn State. I understand why people are. I know that schedule looks good, but I've been burned by Matt Campbell recently, so I'm not ready to accept it. Let's talk about another team that is going to potentially try and do the same thing that Indiana is doing. They've announced it. They haven't necessarily taken tangible steps yet in terms of what they're doing as far as the transfer portal pickups and bringing guys in are concerned. But Northwestern announced their intention to infuse the program with an amount of money so that they can become a player in the Big Ten. They've obviously got the new stadium that they're going to unveil this year. It's a really nice stadium. What are your thoughts on a team like Northwestern and really any team from a P4 conference trying to go the route of, yeah, we're going to throw some money around because we have it, and whether you think that's truly a successful route to becoming in Indiana or if it requires a little bit more?
I mean, I feel like this conversation happens every 3 years where they're like, "Oh, guys, do you know Northwestern's in Chicago and they have money and they could make a run if you just invest in it?" And then it kind of falls down a little bit. And I feel like we're just back in that cycle. But I mean, that $800 million stadium that's going to be on the water, I mean, that's going to be incredible. Can't wait to see that. But I still think at the end of the day, if you're a top recruit, it's like, oh, Frank Signetti in Indiana or Northwestern. I'm going to go with the proven winners. Oh, that or Penn State, like the powerhouse program. I'm going to go with that over Northwestern. But, I mean, we saw BYU throw money around and have guys make their way to Salt Lake City or Provo, Utah. And, money talks.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I do think, kind of going back to a point I made earlier about there being the ability for P4 schools to more quickly close any gaps that exist, being there because you can do this. And the Northwesterns of the Big Ten are aplenty, right? There's a lot of Big Ten schools, a lot of good research schools that have wealthy donors, and it really only takes a couple of wealthy donors to put together a plan and a collective to infuse the athletic program with the money that they need to fairly quickly lure in some good athletes to the revenue sports programs so that you can be a Texas Tech, or in the case of in Indiana, you really truly do get the job done. But to be in Indiana, I do think that you need something more than that. I really think that Kurt Signetti is one of the elite guys in terms of figuring out this era of college football and what it takes to actually be successful year over year. Whereas I'm not sure that you can just put money into it and expect that they will come. It's not the field of dreams necessarily. It's close, but it's not the field of dreams.
I agree 100%.
All right. So last Big Ten-esque related topic that we'll touch on here is the Daquan Wright situation, which was not originally going to be a part of this episode, but it has taken so many turns in the past several days that we would be remiss if we did not mention it. For those listening that are not up to speed yet with the situation, high level, here's what has happened in the last 8 or so days. Daquan Wright, who was previously a member of Ole Miss's football team, declared for the NFL draft in 2026, went undrafted, and ultimately ended up signing on with the Philadelphia Eagles, were cut by the Eagles, and then signed on with the Cleveland Browns and was trying to make the squad during the preseason in Cleveland. Wright was not going to make the team, so he announced his intention to re-enter the portal to play college football this season after signing on with a professional team. This was allowed because of an injunction from a Louisiana court that allowed this. A day after he decided that he was going to put his name into the portal and announced his intention to join LSU to meet up with his old coach at Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, the Big Ten came out and announced that they were not going to allow players that had previously been in the professional leagues to play college football after they had announced their intention to leave the sport. One day after the Big Ten made that decision, the SEC had an about face and announced their decision to essentially join forces with the Big Ten's decision, and they were not going to allow players either, which essentially meant Daquan Wright was not going to be allowed to play for LSU this season. Since that time, the Big 12 has announced their intention. I think the ACC is the only P4 conference that has not yet announced their intention, but uh, all the signs are pointing towards all of the major conferences in college football, and actually now college basketball for that matter, are going to take this stance on their own, separate from what the NCAA has ruled on, which is effectively nothing. So all of this is to basically come to the question that I want to ask you about, Michael, which is the Big Ten and the SEC, in my opinion, have long been the actual guardrails in college football and in college sports in general at this point that people sometimes argue does not exist because the NCAA has no power. But because the Big Ten and the SEC were able to take these hard stances on this scenario, I think that it is the best example that those two conferences are really pulling the strings behind the scenes. They've had these discussions, and there are guardrails when it comes to the revenue sports in collegiate athletics. It's just not coming from the area that people expected or thought it was supposed to come from. What are your thoughts on that?
Another reason why the Big Ten is the superior conference, laying the groundwork first and everyone following. I mean, you mentioned NBA, and I'm glad you did because we saw many guys get G League contracts. Guys that have been drafted come back and play college. Insane ruling. And then for this with Wright, and even Xavier Harris, who people thought could have been a mid-round pick, went undrafted. I think that says enough in and of itself. And then trying to go back with LSU as well. But Lane Kiffin behind it all. The master manipulator. I'm glad that everyone's standing up to being like, okay, we've crossed the bridge too far. And it's one thing to say, 100 other players got an injunction, saying like, oh, I was at like Max Johnson still playing. So many times I'll hear like a lower level quarterback. It's like, oh, this guy, you saw him play 2 games on a game once before, 2 games on a Power Five team, and it's like, oh, these guys are still around. I can't believe it. You should be on with your life's work, but there's got to be a line somewhere, and it seems like we found it.
Yeah, and it seems. I mean, I don't think that the Big Ten and the SEC got together in a room and in 18 hours figured out the decision that they wanted to make. I think this is something that they've been talking about for a long time. And this situation finally prompted them to take a public stance on it. And I think that's the point that I want to make, which is something that I'm not sure that I've really made on this program too many times, but I've felt this way for a while, which is that the Big Ten and the SEC are the entities that are guiding college football and to a greater extent college athletics towards where they are headed in this new era with NIL and the transfer portal, et cetera, not the NCAA. And I think the more that we blame the NCAA for being the problem and for not having any guardrails for these things and not coming out with stances, we're getting further away from what really is happening in college sports, which is that the conferences are deciding what makes the most sense for them and for the way they want to see this develop. And they're ultimately going to make the rules here. And the NCAA is almost a figurehead, if you will, right? They're the little blue circle that we put in center court during March Madness, and we put on the corner of an end zone for the FCS playoffs because we think that it ties everything together with a nice bow. But in the end, these conferences are the ones making the decisions, and I love that as a podcast, we have the ability to kind of sit back and think about our responses for this because I was listening to Cowherd earlier in the week and his initial take on this was, well, I don't blame the kid. I don't blame Lane Kiffin. This is the NCAA's fault. And then you have to do this about face 24 hours later because the decision is actually being made in the background, just not by who everybody thought it was supposed to be made by.
It kind of makes me think of like when there's NFL things like or pro like NBA things are like, oh, Adam Silver this, Roger Goodell that. It's like, yeah, they represent the 32 owners, so it's the 32 owners telling them what they want. And in this situation, like, oh, the NCAA is not doing its job. It's like the schools are the NCAA. Like, I get what you're saying that there's not the governing body, but it's like the people playing and doing the logistics are the decision makers and are driving what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's a great comparison. And I think that this situation is maybe bringing light to that in a way that while there's been some other signs of it in the past, maybe it hasn't hit people right in the face the way that this situation has, because it did on its face. This situation seemed ridiculous until it wasn't, until it actually became relatively logical the way that it was handled by the Big Ten and then consequently the other conferences as well. All right. That is all we've got on the Big Ten. We're going to quickly switch to Conference USA. It's not one that I have up on Around the Corn Sports blog yet. That one is coming. As I mentioned, it'll be there before Saturday. So go check all those out if you're somebody who likes to read in-depth previews. The one question I'm going to have for you, Michael, about Conference USA, Liberty. Is Liberty the most unlikable team that could serve as an underdog in college football? And let me quantify that before we talk about it, because you look at Liberty and, you know, obviously they're coming from a G6 conference. They have the ability to make the playoff as one of the auto bids if they happen to be the highest ranked champion of a G6 at the end of the season. So there is a built-in path for them to get there. They haven't done it yet, but they have a good chance this year, and they've had a good chance in the past couple of years as well. But it feels to me like a team that I can't root for. I want to root for all the G6s. I want a G6 team to have a seat at the table in a 12-team playoff, and if it expands, maybe you give them a couple. But Liberty in particular seems like a team that is hard to root for in that scenario. What are your thoughts on Liberty?
I have very little thoughts on Liberty. I had to look up the Conference USA because it's been so long, and I'm just looking now. I'm like, wow, these like Kennesaw State. I didn't even realize was in Conference USA. Now I thought they're like it's new Sun Belt. I mean, that's what I'm looking at, and I think if a team, any team from here went 11-0, I would say, yeah, guys, we have to like look at this and say unless they beat like 2 or 3 top 25 teams or like play like good competition, but I don't think they do out of schedule. It's like this is Sun Belt. Like this is not a top tier team. At least like Tulane will beat a team every once in a while, or South Florida will upset and should be like in top 25, things like that. Um, but I just think it's a weak conference and weak teams.
Fair enough. And in fairness, that's also why we're not spending a lot of time on Conference USA in this episode. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that. I don't spread a lot of hate on this show, and I do that for a reason. And I don't like to spread a lot of hate when it comes to G6 conferences because I have a soft spot for those teams. But Liberty to me feels like the evil empire when it comes to G6 teams, and it's weird because they really haven't had a ton of success, but just their general presence in the sport is difficult for me to get on board with. But that is what we have as far as conference wraparound is concerned. Michael, to end this show, what I want to do is preview the 8 games that are happening in week 1 this coming Saturday. We're going to go one by one. Normally I do this on Around the Corn Sports blog where we pick 5 games and we see who's got the better record at the end. We're going to do this verbally this week because there is no week 1 preview that I'm putting out on the blog. So starting with the first game, North Carolina versus TCU. This is the one that's played overseas in Dublin, Ireland. TCU comes in as a 9.5-point favorites, according to DraftKings. What's your thought on this game? Give me a winner and whether you think somebody is going to cover or if they're going to be within that cover range.
Oh, I mean, I think it's just a repeat of last year, another TCU beating. I'd take up to 20 points if I could get it. Um, unless you're not UNC, they play Pitt October 10th. Is Belichick the coach the entire year? Or is he out before things get bad and out of hand?
I don't think they get rid of him because he's too good for marketing there, even if they're not having a good season. But I do think that if he has another season like he did last year, he may just decide to leave on his own.
Yeah.
It's probably not worth it at that point. I've always been convinced that this was a last ditch effort and a far fetched one at that for him to try to work his way back into the pros.
Oh,
And
I
it
think he
doesn't seem
thought he
like,
was going to get a mid-season offer. People reaching out to him. Everyone's like, "No, we're good."
yeah, yeah, I don't see him going back to the NFL via the route of having a successful college stint. But I'm with you. I think TCU can cover this game. TCU is kind of an underrated team in the Big 12. I know we talked about them kind of being a two-horse race there, but TCU does have some talent, and North Carolina, especially when you go and you play overseas, you're not really sure what you're going to get from either team. So I'm going to have to take what I believe is the more talented roster on paper. Next game, we've got 3 o'clock Eastern kickoff. This one's on NBC. USC is at home hosting San Jose State. They're a 38.5 point favorite in this one, Michael. Who do you have in this one? California battle.
I think it's USC in another like 40-point beating. I think that's right around 38 and a half. I think you said, or at least that's what I have written down. Definitely think it's in that 40 range. I love the San Jose State. They were always my NCAA team, but definitely USC. And do you have a quick Lincoln thought at all before you give your selection? Another hot seat.
Yeah, I don't think he's on the hot seat. I think they've got a good team this year, and they're poised for a good season. But I think he needs to prove it, and by prove it, I think he needs to make the playoff. I hear many positive things about what he's able to do with his quarterbacks, but in terms of what the teams are able to do, even when he was at Oklahoma and was making the playoff, they weren't able to get the job done. And I want to see real results from him. And I think now is the time. Jaden Maeva is a really good quarterback. They've got the team that could potentially get it done. Let's see him do it now. But I'm with you. I think they're going to win this game easily. I wonder whether or not San Jose State is able to clip the spread there. Kenya Matololo had a really rough year last year. I was burned by them. I thought they were actually a potential playoff contender out of the Mountain West, and they really didn't come anywhere close to that. So I'm looking for a rebound from the Spartans this year.
I think you need to get committed after picking them for a playoff team, Kyle. That's pretty extreme.
You know, I was really looking forward to the game they had against Texas last year, and I thought that was going to be one of these games where maybe they would show something against a ranked squad, and they showed close to nothing, and they showed not much throughout the regular season after that either. But that's neither here nor there. Number 3 on the list. This game starts at 3:30, so you'll go back and forth between this one and the USC game. Probably mostly focused on this one because it is a lot closer in terms of the spread. North Carolina State visits Virginia in an ACC battle to kick off the season. Virginia is a 4-point favorite in this one, Michael. They are the ACC runner-up. What do you think about this one? I think this one has some intrigue to it.
Oh, I'm very interested in the Virginia roster this year. Bo Perillo from Missouri and Penn State transfer. My Penn State people loved him over Drew Aller when he was on campus, but then transfer, gets the injury, and now here. And then the backup for Virginia, Eli Holstein, Bama, and Pitt. So there's some interesting cats there. And NC State just had half their defense graduate or go pro. So I think Virginia maybe by 10, but I don't expect a huge blowout, but handedly winning.
Okay. I think this is the first game that we're different on. I'm
Ooh.
going to go straight up and take North Carolina State with the upset here. I've actually got North Carolina State doing pretty well this year. I think they have the potential to be an ACC title game contender. I love CJ Bailey at the quarterback
He
position.
beat him
He's a
last year.
future pro. He's a future pro, and the thing I like about North Carolina State in general is the schedule. If they can get through this game, they can show me something here. The schedule opens up quite significantly for them all the way through, and I see this as a potential double-digit win team. But they've got to show me something in this game. If they don't win this game, it all falls apart after one contest. So this one is one I feel like I've got to have in terms of my predictions for the season. Moving on to number 4, Jacksonville State at North Dakota State. So we're going to see 2 teams that 10 years ago were not part of the FBS division. North Dakota State obviously having their inaugural season. They're going to welcome Jacksonville State to the Dome. This one kicks off at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, and the Bison are home favorites by a touchdown. What do you see happening here?
I think the Bison Stampede. We were just talking about how bad Conference USA was, and Jacksonville State is one of those teams. I think North Dakota State makes a big presence, and they show that this year. They're on a Maryland or Northwestern level where it's like, hey, we're a team, but like we're not ready yet.
Okay. All right. I'm going to actually go against the grain here as well, and I'm going to show some love to Conference USA, which is something we haven't done a whole lot of in this
Yes.
episode. Um, I like Jacksonville State. I think that they have the chance to make me happy by keeping Liberty out of the title game in that conference. I really love Caden Creel, the quarterback, a great dual threat option there. He's going to have his hands full with that North Dakota State defense. They're nasty. They always are, and they're playing at home. So it's going to be a tough game for the Gamecocks, but I do think that they have the ability to come in as a team that understands what it takes as far as physicality and talent level is concerned at the FBS level, and they're going to give North Dakota State everything they can handle. I'm a little bit surprised that this one's a touchdown spread here. I think it has something to do with the environment of the home team, but we will see what happens there. Game number 5. This one is another barn burner potentially. Sacramento State also kicks off their FBS season, inaugural FBS season against Eastern Michigan. So they're going to be up at Ypsilanti for a 6:30 p.m. local time start, which for Sacramento State is going to be a 3:30 p.m. start. Eastern Michigan comes in as a 9.5-point favorite in this one. What do you have to say about it, Michael? I know you're a huge fan of both of these teams and you've been following them closely.
I was following Sacramento State closely for Brennan Marion. Pittsburgh guy, was a former Pitt wide receiver coach, got an OC job in Texas, then became OC, or he got not an OC job in Texas, but job in Texas staff, OC for UNLV, became head coach of Sacramento State last year and just left in the offseason to go to Colorado and be Dion's OC. So I think that they are going to be feeling that loss badly, being like, oh, our coach just left us. How can we believe in ourselves? Eastern Michigan fighting Charlie Batches.
Yeah, I think what's crazy about the situation with Sacramento State is that it feels like a corporate decision almost to try to push them into the FBS prematurely.
Mm-hmm.
I read the story that Alonzo Carter, the current coach of the Hornets, was actually surprised to learn that they were making the jump this year, and the transfer portal window had already closed, signing day had already come and gone, and he was recruiting for the FCS level. And this is a team who was 7-5 last year and finished 4th in the Big Sky. So they weren't even really cleaning up in the lower division, and now they're going to be making that jump. And I do see them having a really tough go of things in year one, given everything that they're up against. So I have Eastern Michigan both winning and covering. I actually like the Eagles this year. I think they've got a really good quarterback in Noah Kim, and I expect them to get back to a bowl. So this is a good first start for them if they're able to get the job done. Game number 6, Hawaii at Stanford. We've got a rematch of last season's first week game. This one's a 7 p.m. kickoff. That's Eastern time, so it's going to be a 4 p.m. kickoff local time at Stanford. They come in as 4-point home favorites here. What are your thoughts on the second round of these two teams in as many years?
I'm gonna have to go with Stanford, ACC pride. Making those big trips from here to the East Coast, and um, I mean they're on the Pacific Coast. The conferences are just so broken. It breaks my heart. But Stanford still for the win.
I wanted to go with Hawaii in this one, but I
Same.
can't take them coming over to the mainland in week 1. I like them. I think they're going to be an exciting team this year. They might even contend for the Mountain West title, but whenever they have to come over, and especially when you're coming over to play a P4 conference team, I think that it's a tough go for the Rainbow Warriors. And so I do think they're going to keep it close. 4-point spread suggests it's going to be somewhere in that, field goal to touchdown range. And I do think that they're right in that range, but I'm going to go with the Cardinal as well. And Stanford might be a little bit better than people expect this year, but it's just so hard to gauge that when you start looking at records as you get near the end of the season. All right, game number 7 of 8 on the list. This one's also a 7 p.m. start, so you have your pick, either ACC Network for Hawaii and Stanford, or if you want to switch over to the CW, you can catch New Mexico State, against Florida State. This one is in Tallahassee. Florida State is a 31.5-point favorite over the Aggies. What do you see happening here? Is Mike Norvell going to get off to a good start?
Oh, the great start. They get so excited for this big win. I'm saying a 55-10 Florida State win.
Yeah, I think they're going to try and make a statement here as well. If anything, because it's first game, everybody's excited. There's going to be a lot of juice down there, and quite frankly, when you consider the teams that maybe I've done a minimal amount of preparation for, New Mexico State would fit that bill. So I don't I don't have much to say about them, and they're coming in as 30+ point dogs. So I can't go against what the wise guys in Vegas say in this one. Last game, and this might be the game of the day outside of perhaps North Carolina State and Virginia. Memphis and UNLV will clash at 10 p.m. Eastern time. This one is a Fox game, so you don't need to have any of the streaming services to view this one, and it should be a good one. These are two teams that, if Michael and I are correct on our assessment, are going to have pretty good opportunities to be contenders for an auto bid to the playoff this year from their respective conferences. So, Michael, UNLV comes in as a 4.5-point favorite at home here. They play at Allegiant Stadium, so they're in the dome. How do you see this one going?
I really want to cheer on Memphis, but I just think UNLV is too strong. I'm going to say it's a close one, maybe a last minute touchdown, comeback drive, or field goal from UNLV in a shootout, of
I'm
course.
with you. I'm with you. I like UNLV. I think they've got a lot of talent. Dan Mullen is doing a good job at bringing in transfers year over year that keep the cupboard stocked in Vegas. And I really like what he's got with Jackson Arnold at quarterback. And I think Jaden Jet Thomas at running back is a really good player, too. Um, UNLV, I think they're going to cover that as well. I'm not super high on Memphis this year, but they are a team that you've always got to keep an eye on. So I've got some buddies who are actually going out there. One of them has a family member who plays for Memphis, so they're going to go enjoy the game and enjoy Vegas after that. I wish them well in this game, and if they're listening, I'm sorry, guys, that I'm picking the Rebels in this one, but for your sake, hopefully it's another K-Bex kiss of death prediction here. All right. Well, Michael, we've had a great episode here. We're right about that 120 mark. So, a good time to wrap things up. Before you go, last question of the episode. I want to ask you, who are your stone cold locks for this year's college football playoff? There is no requirement as to the number of teams. Just give me who you are saying, I'm throwing everything on these guys. They're going to make the playoff this year.
I'm going to give you three, and we talked about, or so the final four. We talked about three of them. So Oregon, Old Miss, Miami, and then I have Auburn in the final four with Byron Brown, Heisman Trophy winning Byron Brown, first round pick Byron Brown. But in the finals, I have Oregon over Miami.
Okay, Byron Brown, Alex Golish, and the Auburn Tigers. That one is not one that I expected to hear. I might have to clip that one and make that one of the audio clips of the week to promote the show. That
I
one
heard,
is
I heard a. I'm sure you know Alex Kreishner. I only read it, so I never like hear his podcast. But I read his work, and he said that Byron Brown is the seventh best quarterback in the SEC, and I was ready to throw hands. I was like, I've got a couple games last year. I was all in. I was like, there's something happening here. And when they went together, I was like, I'm sold.
hey, he is an absolute bear to bring down. I think that he's going to have a great season there.
Welcome back, Bex. My Byron Brown take was so hot that it broke your internet.
We've had some definite technical issues here. I'll be doing a little bit of editing, more so than I do in other episodes. But yeah, he is a bear to bring down. I think I'm going to get everything else that I said before I had my computer shut down on me. But he is a tough guy to tackle. I'm not sure I would say I anticipate him getting the team all the way to the college football playoff. But I love that pick. Going out there on a limb, and I appreciate you sharing those things with me. For the listeners out there, That was the tease, because next episode on Conversations, it is the 1 year anniversary, and we're going to do a show that is very similar to episode one, which is KBEX's college football playoff predictions. So be sure to come back to the show next week when we have those unveiling. And if you want to make sure that you've got us on tap for when we release that episode, make sure that you go ahead and follow us on all the socials. Again, Facebook, X at KBEX_ATC, Instagram at cornversationspod, and you can follow us on all of the major streaming platforms as well. Michael, it was really nice to have you on the show again. Love talking ball with you. Hopefully the viewers or the listeners enjoyed it, and hopefully you will enjoy not just week 0/1, but the rest of the season as well.
I will, because you'll be there with me, KBEX, and providing college insight and help me grow my knowledge while I work out at the gym. That's when I listen to conversations.
I love that, and I am happy to be a source of a little bit of information. I wouldn't say an expert by any means, but
I go still
hopefully
steal
the
KBEX. That's what I look for college football answers.
I love that. That's the best compliment that I've gotten all week. Well, again, listeners, thank you for listening. Hopefully, you have gotten yourself through the dead period of the summer, the dog days, if you will, without sports. But we're back, and college football is just around the corner. We'll see you next time. And until then, take it easy, Shuckers.